Hey y'all, just very quickly before the video proper gets started, I just wanted to stop real quickly and just mention that I filmed this video almost 2 weeks ago, back when I thought that I was back out of my depressive episode. Unfortunately, pretty much right after I filmed that video, I very quickly realized that I was not as back as I thought I was. I was still really struggling with wanting to film and wanting to edit and wanting to read and wanting to write. And then something very, very serious happened at work, which I played a role in, and that completely kicked the crutches out from under me, so to speak. You know, if I was struggling to get back on my feet, that knocked me right back down. I have spent the last week and a half kind of dealing with that mentally, and I am really truly feeling like I'm ready to be back again. So I just want to say this video was filmed a couple weeks ago. I had convinced myself that I was ready to be back. I wasn't really. Then I faced a major setback mentally. I'm really truly feeling back this time, and I'm looking forward to writing again, participating in live streams, being a part of the community, and finally getting back into the meat of this draft. Thank you so much for sticking around. Sorry that this month has been a little bit wonky, but I really do feel like today is the start of truly being back to normal. So with that, please enjoy the video. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Just Another Struggling Writer, the Bleakird Authors one-stop shop for commiseration and hopefully inspiration. My name is Carrie Scher, and I am just another struggling writer. Well, today I'm going to be talking about something that has been on my mind lately. As you probably know by now, the last couple of weeks have been a little rough for me as I have been dealing with a depressive episode that has robbed me of my creative spark. Fortunately, it's starting to pass and I am ready to start writing and creating again. But one thing that I thought about a lot while I was dealing with this was whether or not I should quit writing. Don't worry, I never really seriously considered it. But I did reflect on a lot of times in my past where I did consider quitting writing. And I actually think that this is something that most writers probably go through: doubt and questioning and self-deprecation, and wondering if you have what it takes to be a writer. But the key is overcoming that urge. I'm gonna be doing a little cross stitching while we talk so I can multitask a little bit. The pattern I'm currently working on looks like this. And so far, all I have done is the white background. So I'm not gonna show you what it looks like currently because it's just a bunch of white. So like I said, there have been a lot of times in my adult life that I have considered quitting my aspirations of becoming a published author. And one of the biggest ones that I grapple with kind of every day in a way is the fact that I am getting older. Obviously, there's no age or time limit on publishing a book. But if I'm being honest, I'm well past the age I would prefer to be at to be launching a writing career. I don't think my dreams and ideals of being a published author in my 20s and early 30s is that unique. What I have come to appreciate, however, as I've gotten older is how rare and unlikely that is. I finished my very first draft the day before or the week I turned 30. And at the time, I thought that that was going to be a turning point. And I honestly thought that within 5 years, I would be published because I had finally gotten over the hump of writing a complete first draft. I had finally pushed myself to a height I had never yet reached. And all I had to do was keep going and replicate what I had done to get there. But about 6 months later, I came to the realization that that first draft was bad. And I mean, not in bad in the sense that all first drafts are bad. I mean bad in the sense that it did not function as a story. It was completely broken and it needed serious, major revisions in order to work, almost to the point where that first draft was more like a zero draft. It helped me establish the voice of the characters, but that was about it. So much needed to be rewritten. The governmental system, elements of the plot, I needed to add characters, I needed to take some away. There was a romance element that was supposed to be a big focus that just never came together. So much of it needed massive overhauls, and that completely discouraged me. I was not prepared to undertake such a massive revision. This was, like I said, the very first draft I'd ever completed, and I had really pinned a lot of my hopes on it. And to realize that it was so bad as to need a complete rewrite, from back to front, with a whole new outline, a whole new plot structure. I kind of fell apart. I didn't realize it right away though. I thought that I could just put it back on the shelf and let it percolate a little bit and let it marinate in my brain juices, and hopefully I could take it out in another year or two and be ready to do those massive rewrites. In the meantime, I would work on some other ideas that I had conceived of, and all will be well. I would still be on my 5-year plan of being published. That was 6 years ago. 6 full years passed between completing first drafts. And those 6 years were riddled with moments of doubt and moments of wanting to quit. I probably started 4 or 5 new projects and never made it past the 25,000 word mark. And every time I put it away, or every time I got a shiny new idea, and the guilt would set in that I was neglecting the project I was already working on, and every time I would spend weeks at a time without writing or thinking of ideas, I doubted my commitment, I doubted my passion, I doubted my ability to be a writer. I started writing again seriously as an adult in around 2014. At that time, I was a stay-at-home mom to 2 kids and had a 3rd on the way. I had been kind of working on a manuscript off and on, kind of developing ideas and reshaping the plot a little bit, but I did have kind of a firm idea of the beginning, the ending, the main characters, and the main thrust of the plot. And then at the beginning of 2015, me and my now ex-husband separated. It was kind of a very whirlwind process. I went from thinking that my marriage was totally fine to understanding that I would be divorced within 3 months. And after we separated, I ended up moving back home to be with my family. And obviously it was just a really emotional time for me. I was heavily pregnant at the time and trying to, be a mom to my young kids who didn't understand what was going on. I was living with my mom again. It was just, it was a time. And obviously my passion for writing by necessity had to take a back burner. I was not in a place emotionally to be thinking about anything creative. And moreover, I just didn't have the time or the bandwidth. And this was another moment where I really thought that my dreams of being a writer were never going to be realized and I should just give up. Before my divorce, I was a stay-at-home mom. And so I had more time than I think I truly appreciated to think about writing. Afterwards, I had to go and find myself a job. I was facing being a single parent and all of the effort and time that meant I was giving up. And writing it was not a priority. But something funny happened shortly after I started work at my new job. I started getting ideas again. And at first, these ideas were just little notes that I kept to myself in a notebook I kept in my purse, right alongside the notes I was taking about my new job. It was just something to kind of think about and occupy my time. It really helped me not think about what I was going through with my divorce. And eventually, I realized that I had what I thought was a decent plot. Now, it took 2 years from the original conception of the idea to actually sitting down and outlining it and getting ready to draft it and then finally drafting it. But if I had just given up on writing, and if I had never taken those notes, and if I had never jotted down those character ideas and plot ideas, if I had never indulged that curiosity and that creativity, I never would have written that first draft. And so even though at the time I had kind of considered myself out of the writing gig, it couldn't quit me, as it turned out. And I think that's probably true of a lot of writers. No matter how much you think you're out, it always finds a way to pull you back in. Because most often, writing isn't something you wake up one day and go, I think I'm gonna write a book. It's something that most of us, I think, harbor for years. Our childhoods are riddled with stories that we tell, and stories that we heard, and stories that we wanted to create for ourselves. It's almost like a parasite that you may not always know is there, and if you do, maybe sometimes you try to ignore it, and other times you try to feed it, but it's always there. It's always hovering at the back of your mind. It's always nourishing itself on your ideas and things that you experience and the media you consume. And then one day it completely takes over your brain and forces you to put pen to paper. I mentioned media nourishing that creative spark that feels almost like a parasite. But there was a time in my life too that I considered quitting writing because of media that I consumed. Specifically, this book. Reading this book was transformative for me, and I am not joking when I say I almost considered quitting writing because this book was so perfect. I could not conceive of myself writing anything that could even remotely measure up to it. And so what was the point? Reading this book was so visceral in so many ways. And I truly did not anticipate the gut-wrenching feeling of never being able to measure up to N.K. Jemisin. Fortunately, after a couple of weeks, the pendulum swung back the other way and I was no longer wanting to quit writing because of this book. This book helped inspire me to continue writing because while I may never write a book as perfect as this one, I still have something to contribute and I still want to aspire to this level of greatness. If I achieve just a fraction of that, then I think it's a pretty damn good book. But to become a writer, you have to start, right? You have to start somewhere. And honestly, that took me longer than I care to admit. With the benefit of hindsight, I think I know why. Although I was very creative as a child, I read voraciously and even tried to write my own boy wizard series that shall not be named knockoff when I was around 11 or 12. My writing took a different turn as I became a teenager. And this will not shock you to learn that it was at that time that I discovered the world of fan fiction. I am an elder millennial, and so in my day, the fan fiction repository was fanfiction.net. And finding that website completely changed the trajectory of my life, and I wish I could say that I was joking. By the time I was 14 or 15, I was posting on that website. I was writing for all kinds of fandoms, anime and sitcoms, movies, the Boy Wizard series, pretty much anything that I liked, my brain automatically started developing stories for. Fan fiction helped me find and maintain friendships. Fan fiction helped me explore my sexuality in a safe way, in a way that I controlled. And in many ways, fan fiction helped me develop as a writer. But the flip side of that is I think spending so long writing fan fiction actually stunted growth in other areas of writing. As you know, fan fiction relies on already existing worlds and most often already existing characters, which meant that, yes, I could come up with plots and I could write romance scenes and short stories based on these characters, but I struggled to come up with setting, I struggled with description, and I struggled with coming up with my own original long-form plots. And so in my early 20s, as I decided I would like to take a stab at writing, I had the horrific realization that I had become too reliant on fan fiction and that I couldn't come up with any original ideas on my own. And for a long time, I worried that I was never going to be able to break out of that cycle. Eventually, it took me giving myself permission to take a character I had already created for a D&D campaign and build a plot around her and then transition that into something original. I had to bridge the gap, and that was the only way I could get myself into original fiction was by bridging the gap between fan fiction and original. To this day, many of my story ideas originated in fan fiction. Alternate universe stories that I never got around to writing but had kind of thought about back in my heyday of writing fan fiction. And instead of just never writing them, I held on to them. I kept a list and I started developing them. And in that way, I was able to hone my skills in original fiction. But it's true that I would not be here today as a writer if I hadn't spent 10 years writing fan fiction. And so while it did in some ways limit me, I'm grateful for the lessons I learned while writing it. It was within these creative fandom spaces that I learned about Drabbles, which I am obsessed with, as you now know. And that is a writing exercise I use all the time now to help give myself a little creative boost. It was within fan fiction that I was able to explore plot structure and narrative craft. And I'm grateful every day that I didn't quit, just because it took me a little bit longer to develop my own ideas. So those are some of the reasons I almost quit writing. Getting older, life changes, going 6 years between completed drafts, struggling to get started at all, and really having a hard time developing my skill as a writer because of my history in another form of media. And yet I'm still here. I didn't quit. Or maybe I did. Maybe there were times where I did quit, but I came back. And that's the key. There are going to be times in all of our writing journeys where we're knocked down and we're feeling really discouraged. But the point is to get back up. It doesn't matter if getting back up takes 2 days or a week, a month, a year, or 5 years. The point is that that creative parasite at the back of your brain never really dies. Just because you aren't feeding it doesn't mean that it's not finding sustenance. And I think if you turn your attention to it and you give it a little love, it'll reward you in return, as weird as this metaphor has been. And with that, thank you so much for watching. I so appreciate it. If you like my content and want to support the channel, please like and subscribe or consider leaving a comment down below. I was trying so hard to get that video done before my battery died. Anyway, in my next video, I am trying to create my very own writer author tube tag. I hope to have the questions complete for it in time to film and edit it for Tuesday's video. I hope you look forward to it, and I will see you then. Bye.